Have an enrollment question? Just ask ASAP.
All right, Krystal, we are thrilled to be able to follow up our We Admit podcast with this Ask ASAP question. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Woohoo. Okay. So one of our admission and enrollment practitioners wrote, I'm the second in the office and I struggle with making my mark. Everything I do has to run through my director, and my director gets all the credit and I get all the responsibilities and the fallout if things don't go or work out well. What can I say to my boss who I need to share how I feel, and how do I make this work? How do I get people to notice my contributions as I hope to advance in my profession someday? So there's a lot there, but thoughts, advice, what would you say?
So, a couple of things. One, and this is always going to be the thing, you have to have the conversation with your supervisor, right? And here's the thing, you don't have to go in, sort of guns a-blazing, right? Because sometimes people realize that they're taking credit and sometimes they don't. So I think it's important to go into that conversation speaking a bit tentatively, saying, I'm so happy that you are satisfied with the work on this project. I noticed in the meeting that I wasn't sort of included in that, or you didn't really say my name associated with the work. Is there some reason that you attributed it in that way? Just help me understand. And you will have some supervisors who will say, "Oh my gosh, I was just talking," right? And then you will have some supervisors who totally realize what they're doing. But at least they now know that you are witnessing that and you are seeing that. And now you all can hopefully have an exchange about, I really do want people to know the work that I'm doing. And I would really benefit from this visibility. And here are my career goals. And, you sort of giving me that credit could be really helpful to me in that way. Right. So I think there's a way to have that conversation. The other one I think is to always document your work. Right. I think you should keep a record for yourself of what you've done and what you've contributed to the work. Um, I just think that's good for you to have, and also good for you to be able to articulate that in the future, performance reviews, interviews, whatever it is. I would also tell you that talk about your ideas outside of just that person. There's something about if I'm sharing with my colleague, here's all the work that I'm doing on this, and someone else knowing that. So they will hear that when your supervisor says, I did this, they're like, no, they didn't. Right. So there's something about that sort of camaraderie and community building around it. And you also may have someone in that room who'll say, well, we also want to make sure that we thank Krystal because Krystal put a lot of work into this, right? And so having someone to sort of be your ally in that sort of getting that credit and recognition could also be helpful. The other one that I would say, and I am a little bit of a proponent of this one. In real time, you have to call it out.
Yeah. In real time, you have to call it out.
You have to interject and say, gosh, I'm so happy that you were excited about that project. When I was working on all that research or putting those reports together, and I'm so thankful that everyone said yes to my invitation to be a part of that panel. And then, it was great to have you as a supporter on this. Like in that moment, calling that out about what I did and what we did in the moment, I think is super important. And not laying off of that, right? like,
Right.
so I
Right.
think
Not apologizing for it.
No,
And also keeping the emotion out of it, which I think is going to be
absolutely,
hard,
and I
right?
think you're gonna say it with a smile on your face, right? And sort of but letting people know in the moment and calling it out in the moment, I think is very, very important. The other thing that I've learned about a lot of supervisors is that they're quite insecure. If they don't know how to do something, if something went really well and they weren't a part of it, they may not have even been super supportive of it at first. And then all of a sudden it turns out really well. Their insecurity starts to flare up and that ego starts to get hurt. Right. And they're like, well, I have to let them know that I was a part of this too. Right. So I think there's a part of you that if you know this is who your supervisor is, how are you sort of including them in the work along the way or asking them what role do you want to play in this, right? Or here's how we did this. Like, do you want to learn how to do this, right? Because I think sometimes they're just a little bit insecure about what's going on. So those are some of my tips, but I would say having that conversation and interjecting in real time, I think will go a long way.
Mm. Well, you mentioned the word insecurity, and I will say that I am not insecure about knowing that when I have a question in this particular way, I want to reach out to you. Krystal, thanks so much for your willingness to not only answer this question that
Yeah.
came forward, but also to be part of our podcast called
Yes.
We Admit that you can listen to on Spotify and all these other. So, again, thank you. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Ask at asap.org. Send your questions.
This discussion is intended for general education purposes and not intended as specific advice. The tips and strategies provided in today's discussion are suggestions based on our experience. Keep in mind that every situation has unique facts and circumstances, which could alter our recommendations in any given situation.